Okay, the last segment of our thing is court and admissibility in court. I think we've touched on this in the last 2 days, and we really haven't seen any court challenges yet, but nor have we seen a lot of cases. But I think one of the things, at least in California, we have the FRI, and most of the things are based on, whether or not it's generally accepted in the scientific community and the various types of academia and other disciplines that are using this. And I think we provided you with a lot of information on a lot of different disciplines, whether or not they're archaeology, paleontology, actually geology, art, even pharmaceuticals. So there's a whole varied interest. It's something that the mathematics has been around for eons. And as far as the single images, you can always go back to one of the 64. The PTM file itself, remember, is kind of an infinite number of lighting areas, sides, sources. And so that may be the more difficult challenge, but it is all compiled from the 64 images. I'd like to hear from anybody that may have a court challenge or something on this particular thing. But I know that when we talked to Tom Malsbender before, he felt that it wouldn't even be an issue, although he's not a lawyer. He's a PhD, and from his little toy shop, he couldn't care less. But I think he would be willing, as the writer of this particular version of it, be able to come and talk about his modifications. And really his modifications are off of bump mapping. And if you go back and back and back, you look at all the various types of kind of modeling or mapping, it's been around for quite a while. And there isn't anything new, novel, and the PTM files, and you need to probably verify this for yourself, do not add any artifacts or any other changes as compared to any one of the 64 images. I mean, it is what it is. From any one side, you mimic any one of the 64 positions around there, and even some in between. The question may be, well, what position is that? And I can see that as a lawyer question. Is it 63? Is it 64? Is it 63.1? What is the number? And that's where you really have to kind of make the jury and the courts understand that, I mean, this is a model. This is a mapping model that, you have an infinite number of light. The whole hemisphere is calculated as far as the intensity or luminescence of the light. And so the 1 through 64 kind of now go out the window, because we've already calculated what is the light value on any given area within that hemisphere. So it's really kind of getting the courts, the lawyers, everybody kind of understand the principle behind the whole thing. And that's where it may be a little more tricky. But having said that, I mean, the academia certainly would be supportive of it. I don't really see anything different in this than we have in other areas. Specular enhancement isn't something new. In fact, specular enhancement exists in various other scientific instruments too. We have specular enhancement in what?
Brought it up. I don't know.
FTIR.
Yeah.
FTIR. I drew a blank there. Yes. Yes.
I think even with the, when you're talking about the viewing or knowing what the position of that is,
right.
I think that's simply asking whoever knows anything about the software at all that, oh, you want to see that? Because it's behind the scenes.
Right.
That value is sitting there right behind the scenes. Right. And, if you want to view it, you just
might be. I'll have to ask him. Though, I mean, to me, it's somewhat analogous to you go out to a scene and you hold your flash and you go, yeah, it looks about right. Poof. And now you get your print. Have you ever been asked, well, where exactly was
Where
that flash
that's
when
right.
you took that
What's
picture?
the location? Give me the XYZ
I've never had anybody
location
ask
of
me
that
that.
thing.
Right, but
Yeah,
you could head the question off so
Yeah.
easily just by
yeah.
throwing it in the.
I'll have to ask Tom to see if we can do that.
So wherever the cursor is, just have that XYZ coordinate
Yeah.
down the bottom, and then as you print it, it would
Then you
be,
print it out, and now it's in your notes, and you
That
want to know
should be-
exactly where it
yeah.
was? It was right there.
well, it would be right in the image as you do the screen capture, so everything will be right there. And I don't see that as too much of a difficulty.
No, I mean, if you're going to go ahead and do a screen capture of, like where, okay, I got like a really good image, and this is where I want to do my comparison, and I want to print it for my comparison. You've got that entire screen that's going to have the cursor captured on it. So you can go ahead and print that at maybe a low res on plain paper to include in your notes to show, okay, this is exactly what I have. Then you can go ahead and crop it out and print a really good quality one on good paper or something like that for your comparison. So I mean, that might be one way of just documenting exactly what settings you had it set at. It's going to show the light bar position, what the values were on your diffuse gain, what amplitude, So I mean that's one way of doing it.
Can anyone else think of any other types of court challenges or any type of a legal challenge that could come from this? Although people are going to say it's new and novel, it really isn't new, nor is it novel. It's just a different application to something that has existed for a long time. And it's based on sound mathematical, scientific foundation. I really don't see much of a problem with it. But, I think that the more questions we ask and try to find out about, the better off we'll be prepared for anything. I posed this question to our DAG in charge of these types of issues, and he couldn't think of anything, but lawyers really aren't that creative until you give them a particular scenario. Once you do that, then they can really glom onto it. But he didn't anticipate anything. As long as you have the original 64 and you're able to explain how this thing really works. And, it's just a different way of visualizing the data that truly is there. We're not adding lines, we're not putting any artifacts in or generating anything that isn't there or wasn't there in the beginning. And that's really the key to the whole thing.
I think it'd be important just to kind of keep it simple. And you're talking about fairly basic photography and lighting, and I can't imagine that it would be questioned as you would get into some, the other stuff that we do with the image enhancement systems and all those things that do, add artifacts where you're really talking very basic photography. I mean, if you go back to that original model that guy did and moving the flash around, gosh, if you talk to the jury for a few minutes about that, I can't imagine an attorney's going to ask you any more questions. They're going to be like...
I mean, in my mind, it's the same thing. If you have a series of vertical lines and you shine the light this way, you're not going to see them because you don't get any shadow that way. But once you shine the light this way, all of a sudden, ooh, you're seeing it. It's always been there, but now all you've done is made it visible. And this program is really just doing the same way, the same thing. It's just shading it in such a fashion that allows you to visualize what's there.
Yeah, I can see some doubt, though, when you go to a specular enhancement versus a normal, side lighting. When you go from kind of maybe a light brown color to a gray color. And even in the specular enhancement where it kind of seems to be lifting out of the image more than it did in the normal image. And really, and that's a little difficult. That may pose a problem on trying to explain about the chrominance and how you're subtracting, adding certain things in order to just bring out detail. And quite frankly, most of that detail you can see in your original one once you go back. It just helps capture it to the mind's eye in the specular enhancement. Yes?
Goes right along the same lines as the challenges to digital photography. And,
Right.
And the specular enhancement, if you had a month and a half in a dark room, you could create that exact same image.
Sure.
But we can do it in 10 minutes with the software.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Math is great. And the computing power of these computers nowadays, even though they have lockout administrators, it's phenomenal. From 20 years ago to this, no one would have ever imagined you would be sitting here each with a laptop. being able to compute as much data and raw data and mathematics through those little computers as you've been able to do in the last 2 days. I mean, you, whether you know it or not, have crunched, thousands, tens and 20s of thousands of different mathematical formulas, just crunching it and compressing data and getting it into that PTM file. It's just amazing, and it's done with a blink of an eye. And so computers are our friend. I notice that they are going to get smaller and smaller as my eyes get worse and worse. I'm looking for bigger. I'm not looking for smaller because I can't see it. But the computing power is much more powerful. I mean, what you have in that computer right there, 20 years ago would have filled at least half this room as far as the memory storage and the computing power. And as we go along, hopefully we can get better. And you're right. I mean, this is a program that is kind of backwards. And then when you start to talk about DOS, I mean, gosh, probably some of you have never heard of DOS before. But trying to stay up with the computing world, the languages, I mean, I still remember BASIC. And that was a long time ago. Or Pascal, or some of those Fortran, which I mean pretty much is by the wayside now. I mean, and as the languages grow, the fourth and all of that, they're all pretty much obsolete now. So DOS is the next dinosaur that's going to die, but there's always something to take its place. And I mean, if you remember back in Windows 2.0, 3.0, 95, 98, and now XP, and then now Vista. I mean, we've come a long way. And Mr. Gates has gotten very rich. But, if it causes a problem with the program, and in this case DOS, then there has to be a fix. And I'm sure there are people out there willing to stand out there and say, take any DOS program and emulate it into a Windows program. I have no doubt, because some of them you just can't do without. So I think that we will be there, and hopefully within the next year or two we can make even this PTM program much easier, much more user-friendly. I mean, you guys have seen how remarkable the program is as you use it, but it would be nice to be able to just hit a button and say make PTM and not have to remember all those things. What was the starting number? What was what was the name of the file? And go into DOS and do these LP create commands and the first number and the name of your file and all that. I mean, if you went from take picture and then hit make PTM, it should. I mean, those are just strings of commands that's all you did before. It should be easy. I would venture that probably some of you in this room could do that. Right, Harold? So, is there any other things about legal issues that you can anticipate or think of that we can hopefully help address? Or we can get you the resources with some of the academia and other people that you do this, and they've been doing it. Some of them have been doing it for over 10 years. Zuckerman over at USC has been doing the archaeology stuff using PTM for well over 10 years. So there are various people in academia that have been using this thing and been excited about it for a long time. This is just a transfer of technology inward. Yes?
An area of discussion that the other workshop groups often got into when they were looking at the legal standards is the accreditation side. 3 elements of quality assurance that they often discussed included competency, training, and documentation for people that use this new technology in your laboratory, especially if it's accredited. So the validation and mini validation of that, certification and documentation of that certification of people, and then ultimately the ISO standard traceability of any kind of standardization that goes into calibrating the instrument to make it meet your in-house standards. So I'm curious if those 3 elements of traceability, competency, and validation are things that you foresee issues with, both from the in-house accreditation side and the legal side who says, hey, you're meeting accreditation standards or not. So I'd be interested if there's any discussion about that.
Well, as far as the validation, that's basically what we did for this study. We compared it to traditional photography, apples to apples. We've shown that there are no false artifacts created. So that's really, you know, for the system that we used and the cameras, and really that's part of that resolution study, was part of that validation on the cameras. So we've basically validated this program against traditional oblique light footwear and tire impression photography. So we've shown that it's not going to create any false artifacts, and that's been published in an article. As far as training, you know, really it's footwear comparison.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you're going to have to take your proficiency for footwear comparison, that thing, but it's really just a visualization tool.
Right.
You know, I don't know what kind of documentation you guys have as far as taking photographs and looking at them. There's not much to the training on the software.
Right. We look at it as kind of an accessory, as another tool to use in whether or not it's latent print, you know, footwear impression, tire tracks, any one of the disciplines. We use it as, look at it as some kind of an accessory to that. The validation that we provided you proves the kind of the one-to-one accuracy versus just traditional photography. Now, with ASCLD Lab and with ISO, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. All you need to do is to verify the wheel. So, I mean, it makes it much easier in your case. You know, if you can use our articles and our papers as part of your validation and just do some comparisons. In fact, you can use a scale ruler. You might have to use a NIST ruler. I mean, but what the only thing you're doing is you're checking whether or not, you know, when you're running through 64 X number of images, that you're not getting any shifting, moving, or any of those other things. I mean, that's about all you can do. And if you want to use some calibration, then you really just put a ruler in there. But you know, it's not the image that's really a one-to-one, but it's the post processing that gives you the one-to-one. It's not. It doesn't matter what size your ruler is. If you want a one-to-one, you take your ruler from over here, and when you're enlarging it. So I mean that's totally different. But so the only thing you can do is define your accuracy by doing multiple shots and overlaying them. And if you got blurry edges, then you know something's moving. If you don't, then you know you have a good system. And that's all you really do. I mean, but you don't validate your cameras at all, do you, every year or annually or something? It's just, it's part of a tool of a package.
You know, when you first have a dome built, you know, if you have one made, I think it's a good idea to go ahead and run some test, you know, to make some test PTMs and look at them, make sure that that particular dome is working for your setup. But after that's done, you know, for that particular unit, I don't see why you would need to continue to do it. There really isn't much calibrating. It doesn't shift. Your flashes aren't sliding down the dome over time. You know, your camera's in a pretty fixed position. I mean, that's standard photography. We don't have to calibrate, you know, how we position a camera while we're taking photos. So it seems to be, to me, to at least be maybe a one-time thing for a new piece of equipment that you've acquired.
Right. And because you have the articles and kind of the stuff that already been here, remember it's a verification, not a validation. Once the validation has been done, you can take it from anywhere. You can attach those articles to your in-lab verification of the equipment and run a mini test on verifying that the results are what they say they are. And that's about it, all you need to do. I mean, but you can do a full validation if you want. You can run through every little step in verifying cameras and the scales within the dome or in the PTM file, but you know, it's done for you. All you need to do is verify. So think of it in those terms if you're looking at ISO or legacy terms, because they're, you know, there's two big issues there, and you don't really want to do more work than you really have to, thinking that it's really required, because it isn't. Anything else? That had come from a DNA guy.
flip chart in the training room where you had your equipment installed. And as part of that, we had written that for another workshop where
Yes.
you always get surprised by the questions that arise both in the legal format and from the accreditation inspectors who come to your lab and have no clue what it is you're doing with technology that's been out for a decade. You're like, and they're the experts that are evaluating me? So, on behalf of NFSTC especially and NIJ, I appreciate so much what happened in the last couple of days. For one thing, your agencies, again, for giving up your time and for you giving up your personal time to contribute to the enhancement of technologies for your subdiscipline of forensic science is how our fields move forward. It's been incredible to watch it as an outsider from your field, what your field has brought to bear in terms of the enhancement that these gentlemen have brought to you, in a sense, to the community through federal funding, but it wouldn't have happened as efficiently and synergistically as it is now, based on all the work that you put into helping them move this forward, put it in the right places, and then through your hands, put it on the right kind of crime scenes eventually through your verified methods that'll be in your hands. Whether they're commercialized or not, you now know how to build one of these tools yourself, and I have a funny feeling with your next interns, you might be doing this kind of stuff. So with that in mind, I'd like to thank all of you for sitting and listening and contributing to the process that NIJ was hoping would happen. It hasn't happened like they thought. It's been way better than they ever imagined it could be. So thank you so much. Mostly, I'd like to say my deep appreciation, sincere thanks to both James and John for your contributions to the forensic community in general, to DOJ, Cal DOJ especially, for giving up your time these 2 days and the months and months of work that went into this. NIJ especially thanks you for being the positive force of why people in crime labs should continue to get good ideas and then execute those good ideas into research projects that leads the fields forward. It's what they exist for, but they don't do it, you do it. Thank you both very much. With your permission, I'd like to give them a round of applause.
Encore.
Yeah, I was going to say, I hope this is not the last time you're talking about this, but you go to Hawaii, you can all go to Hawaii with them.
Yes.
Thank you all very much. Thank you both very much especially.
Any other questions from anybody? I think we're done. You know, for those of you that have a flight that's happening in the next hour.